Imagine pitching your business idea to investors up and down the West Coast only to be told no again and again. And then taking your business from $0 to 1.5 million in 90 days without pitching a single VC, giving away equity, or pulling a bunch of 16-hour days. Today, we are going to talk about how we did that exact thing with our first company, Dauntless, and became these unexpected experts in alternative funding. And what's crazy is thousands of businesses do what we do, but very few of them talk about it publicly. But with the venture capital landscape changing and startups getting scrappier, we have had more and more of our founder friends starting to ask us how we got our funding while keeping control of the business. So today, Dauntless co-founder Sophia Lazaro and I are going to break down the framework that anyone can implement to get their business funded, get on a path to profitability, and keep control of your cap table.
Consultants would charge you thousands of dollars for what we are about to share today, or you would have to go through 18 months of learning it the hard way, like we did, but you're going to get it all for free. Getting straight to the value, the funding vehicle that we are alluding to here is the SBIR, or the Small Business Innovation and Research Program. It's a federal government program, so federal government dollars that get set aside each year to grow American startups. We're going to cover in detail what the program is, how to get into it, how we got into it. But before we do that, I think it's helpful to talk about what Dauntless does and how we arrived at this specific strategy for bootstrapping our business.
At Dauntless, we develop mixed and augmented reality software. We started off developing these apps just for the construction and engineering industry. We have since expanded out of that market, but that's where we started off. And, Dauntless began as a side hustle for us back in 2016, 2017. We both had 9-to-5 jobs. I had the idea for this business after working in the oil and gas industry on the construction side. And one day at a ladies' coloring night, I bought a pitch deck with me that I had printed out and wanted to practice pitching this business idea. Sophia was there. She saw it and thought it was good and crazy enough that she wanted in on the action too.
I also just desperately wanted to be your friend. Like, I actually didn't know you. I had just moved to Houston. I had been invited by someone else at that girls' night to the event. And I remember everyone was like 2 glasses of wine in, and all of a sudden you just pull out this pitch deck. And it was not a brief pitch deck. There was like a thud when it hit the table. And everyone's like, what is happening? And you're like, I have this business idea and I just want to know what you guys think about it. And I was like, I love that. The conversation just got so much more fun. Your idea had to do with augmented and virtual reality, which has been a technology I was exposed to during my undergrad and found incredibly interesting. And it put in the back of my head of, oh, maybe someday I'll get to work on that kind of a technology. And that conversation happened to be at a time when I was trying to move into tech, into software product management specifically, because I'd gotten really interested in how non-technical people who are more business oriented really support and drive how products get made in technology. I think we met for coffee. Like, we were so engaged that we met for coffee like a week later, and we ended up staying at the coffee shop all day. Thank goodness they served lunch. And then the rest is the typical startup history, right? We picked a name, we built a website, we really refined in on what we wanted to build, researching who would buy it, things like that. And that's where we started getting to the point of, now that we know what we think should be built and who we think would buy it, how do we build it?
Right, because neither of us are technical founders. So we either needed to partner with someone who had the ability to develop it, or we needed to go get funding so that we could hire developers and bring them in-house and develop the technology ourselves. So we did spend about 6 months trying to find a company out there that was already building this product or something similar that we could partner with and help them bring it to market. We literally scoured the globe. Like, we took calls with companies in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, throughout the US. And mostly what we found was a bunch of dev shops who were more than happy to build the product, but to send us a bill for the hours, which is not the arrangement we wanted. And, after about 6 months of this, kind of back and forth, I went to San Francisco to go meet with a hardware manufacturer. So it was a company that was making augmented reality headsets. It was Osterhout Design Group, and they are no longer around, but they had a great product and they manufactured it all in San Francisco,
Amazing.
which is really cool. I was over there. I met up with a family friend who happened to be a VC, and he kind of sat me down and was like, okay, you need to stop like faffing around, go build it yourself. Go get the funding, build it yourself, which easier said than done. But at that point, we were like, okay, so we're going to have to start doing accelerators. We need to start pitching investors. We need to get on that grind, which is what we did
Yeah.
with 9 to 5s.
Yeah. Working full time, which is crazy.
Yes, still had our jobs. So we were doing all of this in after hours, on the weekends, during my lunch break. I spent so many lunch breaks in my car with a Wi-Fi hotspot, taking calls and sending emails. But yeah, so at this point, we're like, okay, we need to get funding. The thing to do, the thing that everyone does is they go and take investment. So you give away some equity, some ownership in your company in exchange for early stage funding. And the way a lot of startups do this is they go through an accelerator program, which is like a 12-week-ish program where you develop your business idea, you develop your business model, you really start crafting the narrative of your pitch and your value proposition, and like you can validate a little bit of the market with who your customers might be. So we started applying to all of these different programs. The major one, the one that kind of, set the stage for all of this is Y Combinator or YC. There's also 500 startups. That's another big one. There's Mass Challenge, which we did a round of Mass Challenge. We got into the South by Southwest Pitch Accelerator program as well in 2018. And the very first one we did was an accelerator with Women in XR Fund. So it was specifically designed to help female founded companies with extended reality products get into the market. So that was the first one we did. The idea is that you close your seed round in one day. But when two women get up on stage pitching an emerging technology for the construction industry, aren't exactly, and they're non-technical, people aren't exactly whipping out their wallets to write us a check.
Yeah.
And we knew that going in. Like less than 2% of female founded companies get venture capital, right? Like we knew that going in, but we tried it anyway. We loved most of the programs we did, but it did get to a point where I was like, I cannot do another accelerator program. I'm done being accelerated. And we had to start looking kind of outside of that bubble. And this ended up being really good timing for us because the Magic Leap Independent Creator Program came along. And what that was is Magic Leap was a private company that made XR headsets. And they decided they were going to give out grants to a bunch of software companies to get more apps onto their devices. So we applied for that. We actually submitted 2 proposals. One was for our construction productivity application, and then we submitted a second one for a game idea we had, which was like Doctor Strange style game where you draw things in mixed reality and then that turns into like a spell that initiates gameplay. So we pitched them that idea. Magic Leap did not fund that. They were like, no, we're good, thanks. But we will take your construction app. We need that. We were one of 3 B2B enterprise companies that got funded in that round. And what was great about this funding opportunity was it was effectively a grant. We kept ownership of everything we built. They didn't take any equity. We were just paid as a contractor on 1099 to build this application that was compatible with their headset. And, we got $250,000 to do that. That was unfortunately not enough money for the 2 of us to go full time. So we kept our jobs and then hired in-house development to start building the application. And that program was successful for us. We got it shipped in 6 months and on the platform. What was not great timing was all of this happened in September of 2019. And you all know what is coming Q1 of 2020. We didn't at the time.
Yeah, we're taking the demo that we built on Magic Leap and starting to sell pilots and demo it within the construction industry. And then the construction industry effectively went into standstill because that's not a job that you can do remotely. They were just trying to figure out how to get back in field. Strange time for us. But it had been a good break and a good sign for us that there was a path to fund our development outside of VC funding. Grant really unlocked that mentality of are there ways we could bootstrap this business that isn't just relying on our own money, that set us down the path that we're on today.
That was our first taste of relatively string-free money and showed us that it was possible. Like these opportunities do exist. And like you said, that was really key for when COVID happened, the world shut down, our market, our target market got turned on its head. These were companies that were hiring McKinsey to install Zoom. They were not investing in cutting edge productivity software. So we were doing a lot of our operations in South Texas. We were in Houston at the time. I was going back and forth between Houston and San Antonio to do all of these pilots and demos. The other thing in San Antonio is at an army base. Just being in that ecosystem, we eventually got looped in with an Air Force program called AFWorks, and they invited us to this reverse pitch event where Air Force personnel were describing the kind of technologies that they were looking for, the kind of problems they were trying to solve. If you, as a startup founder or small business owner, had something that was a good fit, you could book a one-on-one with that person. The hope was that it would turn into some kind of contracting opportunity. So we attended one of these pitch sessions mid-April of 2020, height of pandemic craziness. It was all virtual, and ended up meeting a major from the Air Force that was looking for something that we had. And we helped them out with a program that they were running with a university. Didn't really have any intentions of getting on contract at that point. We're just like, this is really cool. Let's see how we can help apply our expertise because, we weren't a defense contractor. We served the construction industry. But if we can help and like evangelize XR and augmented reality, like we were there for it. And then, kind of after that university program ended, the Air Force was like, do you think this would work on aircraft? Like, I know you're using it for construction, but could it work on an Air Force base with airplanes and jets instead of rotating equipment? We were like, I don't see why not. So then we got introduced via AFWorks to the SBIR program. And because we already had a point of contact at the Air Force, they were able to get us into this program, which is completely free, called Apex. It was called Parallax when we did it, but I think now it's called Apex. And they basically helped you put together the initial proposal for your very first baby contract.
Yeah, and I feel like we broke from the usual Silicon Valley startup roadmap, truly started following kind of our own protocol for how we were going to build this business. It's interesting because as a founder, when you're in the early stage startup life, you don't always recognize the moments and the decisions that end up becoming bigger pivots. But for us, that reverse pitch event, getting connected to the Apex Accelerator really was, because that's when we really broke off and we're like, we are going to bootstrap our business and we are going to bootstrap it this way. So this is a good time, I think, to explain the SBIR program that we referenced. AFWorks is the department within the Air Force that administers this program for the Air Force, and how we specifically got into it using Apex.
Yes. So SBIR, SBIR, stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and it is a federal program where every year they take federal money and they set it aside just to give to US small businesses. So this money is distributed to all of these different federal agencies. The DoD, Department of Defense, they get a big chunk of it, but then money also goes to NASA, National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture. They all get SBIR funds to give to small businesses to help them develop innovation that is going to support their operations. So as you can imagine, there's SBIR funding for almost anything across all of those different sectors. And the program itself is phased. So you don't just walk in the front door and immediately get handed like a $10 billion contract. You come in and do a phase one, which is essentially a feasibility study where you demonstrate to your government customer that your idea is technically sound and that you as a team can actually deliver it. These phase one contracts are valued at $50,000 up to 200,000. Some of them are a little bit more, and they typically run for 3 to 6 months. And then if you successfully complete a phase one, which is really not that hard, you basically submit 2 reports and you do it on time and you don't bug your government customer too much, you are invited to submit a proposal for a phase two. So a phase two contract is more money. It's $750,000 all the way up to $2 million. There are some exceptions to that rule. They have phase twos that are like $3 million if you're doing something really complex, especially if it involves launching something into space. They give you a little bit more money to do that. This contract runs for 18 months to 2 years. And at the end of this one, your government customer is expecting a minimum viable product or a prototype, depending on how nascent and emerging your technology is. So you kind of get stepped up, right? You start off little baby contract, just prove you can deliver on time and show up to all the meetings. Then you get moved on to a phase two where you actually have to deliver a product. Whether your phase two is successful or not, either way, you're eligible for a phase three contract. And this is what's called a unicorn contract because it can be for any dollar amount. It can be $0, it can be $10 billion. And your government customer can award that to you at any time without having to go compete for it. You have what is called sole source rights to whatever you proposed under your SBIR contract. So you move through those three phases. Now, there is a down select between phase one and phase two. So not everyone that gets a phase one will win a phase two. And then the amount of companies that transition from phase two to phase three into that unicorn stage is pretty small. It's something like 3%. We'll talk about that later, but that at a high level is what the SBIR program looks like and what the funding looks like compared to VC. And Sophia, I know you can talk about this, but we were able to use this program and be successful enough in it that we didn't have to raise a seed round or a Series A.
It replaced the accelerator pitch grind for us and very productively. Now, I think it's a good time to talk about who's eligible for this program because we were lucky that we were eligible to do the VC thing and eligible to do the SBIR program. That is not necessarily true for everyone. So at a high level, the overall SBIR program eligibility requirements are you must be a US-based company. So they can't engage with you as an individual. It has to be a legal business entity based in the US. That entity has to be a qualified small business, meaning it has less than 500 employees. Entity has to be 51% US owned. Generally, when we think about the owners of the business, you think about the individuals that own equity in the business, but that also encompasses firms. So if you were to take investment from outside of the United States because your product has global reach, it can't exceed 51%. And some agencies even have stricter requirements around the VC requirements, but the 51% is the program level one. And then last but not least, you have to be a for-profit entity. So this program is to grow businesses that will employ people and launch new products to market. It is not for the use of nonprofits or charities. So at a high level, that's what the program requires of you in order to be eligible for it. We were eligible for both VC, and I think this is where we can talk about some of the pros of this specific path and this specific program is for us, the SBIR program replaced the need for a seed round. So we raised as much capital as we were aiming to raise in a seed round, but we gained all that capital without giving away any equity.
We were able to remain bootstrapped and still get the same level of funding as if we went to Series A and maybe beyond. We'll see. We're still doing the program. So the benefit for us was, as a female founded business, the odds of us getting VC funding and being successful at closing a round was less than 2%. Whereas the chances of winning a phase one SBIR for us were 20%. So literally 10 times more probability of winning. For us, it just made sense. And what was really interesting was when we did start putting in SBIR proposals, we actually won 4 back to back. So that was really validating for us because when a proposal is evaluated, the evaluator basically gets a PDF document. They don't know anything about you. They don't really know anything about your company. They don't know what you look like. They don't know how old you are. They get your key personnel, like they get a little blurb on your team, but that's at the very end of the proposal. So you're really being graded on how well the proposal is put together, the technical merit of your idea, and how well your plan is to execute. And it was really validating for us to be like, okay, as soon as they couldn't see us, we started winning. Like this idea, this thing that we were working on, it does actually have some legs. Ruth Bader Ginsburg talked about a similar kind of phenomena with unconscious bias, where when people were auditioning for this orchestra, they used to sit on stage and play their instruments. And the orchestra was always 100% male. And then as soon as they put the musicians behind a curtain so you couldn't see them and then started running auditions, overnight the orchestra became 50% female. So, there was some unconscious bias happening there.
Right. I do think it's important to talk about the downsides of the SBIR program as compared to VC because they do impact how we plan and administer the business. And I think for founders considering the SBIR program, they're relevant. One of the downsides is the fact that the entity does have to be entirely US owned and that all of the work has to execute inside of the United States. Particularly for a software company, that just increases your cost of operations and your competitors who took the VC route are not necessarily making that same choice. So if they've offshored their development, if they've offshored their design, if they've offshored other parts of their operations, they have more capital to do other things with than, for example, we did because all of our development, every element of our operations is happening in the US where we pay more for that talent and we pay more for that labor. So that can be a downside when you are looking at what options you have at your disposal as compared to it being VC backed. The other downside is the longer award cycles, right? We didn't know this when we first entered the SBIR program, but we basically had the most ideal timeline that there ever was. There were no budget delays, there was no award delays, there were no evaluator delays in our first cycles that led to those first 4 contracts that effectively closed what would have been a seed round for us. So our timeline from submitting a proposal to having a contract in hand to starting the work and starting invoicing was 3 or 4 months. I think we were in performance with our first contract 4 months from when we hit submit on the proposal. And again, yes, that can happen. We didn't know at the time that was like the ideal scenario playing out for us. But so the longer award cycles can be more difficult. We, for example, have once applied to a proposal where we didn't hear back until more than 6 months from when the bid had been submitted. So if we had been banking on that money at month 4 and at month 6 we still didn't have a contract, that would have been difficult. It changes the way that we have to plan. Or the last large downside I would call out would be that SBIR, well, we talked about the win rate at a phase 1 being higher probability than the win rate of a female founder raising a seed round. That same probability doesn't always extend to phase 2 and phase 3. Now, we've been awarded both phase 2s and phase 3s, but the rate is much lower. In fact, the odds are that you will never see a phase 3 dollar. So I think that is an important consideration to take, that there are companies that maybe receive valuable capital at a phase 1 and a phase 2, but then they never actually become a program of record or get under a longer term phase 3 contract.
Yeah, this is the trap that a lot of companies that go the SBIR route fall into. So once you get in, you might be really good at winning phase 1s and maybe converting some of those to phase 2s. What happens to a good portion of companies is they just get on an SBIR treadmill. Instead of becoming a program of record and transitioning to phase 3 or spinning up a commercial offering that doesn't go to the government, they just keep applying for phase 1s and phase 2s again and again, because once you figure it out, a formula that works, you can back of the napkin math be like, okay, we're going to make this much money a year just doing these little research and development contracts. There are some companies that have been around for 20 years that this is all they do. They're called SBIR mills, and it is their entire business model to just bid on these small business contracts, and over time they get really good at it. Going back to what we were talking about earlier with that transition to the phase 3 where you can do the really big dollar contracts, that's one of the things where, if you already know that you as a business don't want to become a government contractor, that's fine. You can still use the SBIR program to do the R&D, but then you have to make the conscious decision to exit the program and either go back to the commercial sector or sell the business or go do something else. Whereas if you had taken VC money, like either your runway would run out, your VCs would tell you, you need to exit, you need to, change markets, you need to pivot. In SBIR, there's no one telling you those things. You have to decision yourself, and you need to keep an eye on all of those kind of factors that are going on.
I would say the last consideration is that just like it takes a lot of time and effort to craft pitch decks, find VCs that are a good fit for your vertical, your market, your type of founder, and then put all that work in, there is also a lot of work in the SBIR application process. These are not lightweight applications. Many of them are incredibly dense. We did one that was 40 pages. So, in the process of bidding on topics across these agencies, once we moved into using SBIR as a core part of our bootstrapping strategy for capitalizing the business, we developed not just boilerplate content that made it easier to describe who we are and what we do on different types of proposals. We also created a lot of templates to make aspects of the bids that change every time, like the budget, easier and faster and more efficient to do. Actually, on our Intrepid Gov Proposals website, we have a ton of blog posts with free educational content on everything on how to assert your data rights to how to get each one of the government registrations. And no, you don't need to pay for any of them. Anyone who's selling you government registration support is taking advantage of you. Just use our free guide. And we even have posts with all of our favorite AI prompts and how to use AI to make proposal writing a little bit faster and easier without tanking your win rate. And last but not least, we also include our former winning proposals and our budgeting template on the site. Our winning proposals are helpful because they can really help you see how to frame or format a specific section in one of these proposals, and also what kind of language to use when you're articulating your deliverables. The last piece of it that I find very helpful, being able to refer to a winning proposal if you've never done one before, is being able to see how to structure your narrative from selling the dream of what the technology can do to also setting really clear expectations about what you can deliver under specific funding cap and timeline. Last but not least, our budget template breaks down everything that you need to know to deliver a compliant budget and makes it really easy to collaborate with different team members or subcontractors or research partners, and provides a really clean, comprehensive summary that you can upload with your proposal to help justify and defend your cause.
If someone heard all of this and then decides that, hey, I want to take my business from zero to the first 200K in funding and get into the SBIR program, what is the first step that they can take this week or right now?
Step one is to read our free guide that walks you through all the registrations you need, how to get them without paying for them, and how to start finding topics and agencies where your ideas or your current products could be a good fit. We will link it in the show notes. If you read the guide and are still confused or overwhelmed or have specific questions, reach out to the Intrepid team on the website, intrepidgovproposals.com, and we can set up some one-on-one sessions.
This is incredibly valuable. There was a lot of information in here. We hope that you found this useful. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to check out this one right here. And we'll see you next time. Bye.